This is the full comprehensive guide to deadlifts. Deadlift is one of the most popular exercises, and there's good reason for it. It's a full body developer. A lot of people have done some impressive things with the deadlift. It's normally the exercise that you can lift the most, and a lot of people can attest to its benefits. But then on the same note, it is also an exercise that's probably one of the most avoided. Many people struggle with the deadlift. It's something that they find to be difficult, doesn't feel right, or just remains stuck at the same weight, never moving up. In this video, we're going to go from ground zero to the very beginnings of a deadlift, right up to improving the advanced details of your deadlift much later in your training career. Level 1, pre-activation drills. Now, if you're someone that is more intermediate or advanced, you can just skip to this timestamp and we'll have some information that's a little bit more pertinent to you. However, if you're a beginner just getting started, or you think your technique could use some work, stay tuned. Now, the first pre-activation drill we've got here is the sit to stand. I really like this exercise because it teaches people that have never hinged before to hinge back at the hips. All you do is you basically bend over, grab that kettlebell, and then just stand back up. This usually helps people to understand how their back should be moving on the deadlift. I often find that it seems quite natural to people and they do get themselves into the proper position. Something to avoid is to avoid squatting it, to not be too upright. You can usually prepare for this just by making sure that you bend back at the hips, touch the bench, and then you just squeeze your glutes forward and lock out at the top. Common mistakes in the deadlift. A lot of people, and many of us have seen it, is when they approach that deadlift bar, they don't care how they pick it up, they're just going to try and get it from A to B. And that often looks like having your back bent, like one of these. The problem here is they fully round over at the spine and they don't learn to drop their hips down and really pull the slack out of their back by rolling their shoulders back. The second most common mistake I see is people being hyper aware of this and also conflating a flat back with an upright back. They drop down at the hips as far as they can, almost into the position of a high bar squat, and then they jam their shins right into that bar and just pick it up. This looks like they're about to do an Olympic snatch, some sort of forbidden quad exercise. When you do this, you fully avoid any of the benefits of the deadlift and end up just training an inferior squat. There's no hinge, there's no hamstring activation, there's barely any glutes, and the lower back is almost taken out entirely. Not just this, it's also just a really awkward way of moving it that massively sets back your strength potential. The next most common mistake is the guy that constantly adjusts the bar. Now, when that bar's on that platform, it will probably not sit entirely evenly. You can't sit and adjust and adjust and adjust. You can adjust it as much as you like, but it won't really make that difference. Rather than constantly focus on positioning the bar to you, you should try and just position yourself to the bar. The problem is when you overanalyze and you constantly adjust and don't commit to a stance, you get really inconsistent on your pull. It won't feel right, and there's no way that you'll be able to implement that type of exercise long term. The next biggest mistake I see is people rolling the bar. You are not a 200 kilo bodyweight strongman. Chances are you've seen this online, you maybe think that the momentum helps you, but all it does is just make for an inconsistent pull. Sometimes you'll land right mid-foot and you'll be able to pull really nice and explosive. Other times that bar's going to roll away for you. What you do is you make your deadlift extremely inconsistent and really difficult to repeat. And the less repeatable your deadlift is, the less trainable it is. You've got to practice perfectly, and you can't practice perfectly if the bar leaves your foot at a different point on every single rep. Now for the actual setup. Step up to the bar, feet hip width apart. feet facing forward. You want the bar exactly mid-foot. A good cue for this is for the bar to cut across your shoelaces, or where your shoelaces would be. You want to bend over, grab the bar nice and even on both sides, and then slowly drop your hips until your shins make light contact with the bar. We don't want them to jam out in front, we don't want them to change the position of the bar, it's just a light touch. We then pull all slack out the bar and all slack out our upper back. We keep it nice and tight, we breathe, brace, and pull as hard as we can. What you want to do is, on your breathing, you don't want to just be breathing willy-nilly, we don't want to be breathing at every point of the exercise. We want to take a big breath into our belly, brace down like we're going to get punched in the stomach, holding our breath this entire time. We break the bar off the ground, and only then we can re-breathe and brace once we've put the bar back down. At that dead stop between each rep, we should be breathing and bracing, and when that bar is active and live, our breath is held and our body is nice and tight. Now, something that's not required but is a little bit of advice and something that I do myself is I like to actually take my shoes off when I deadlift. The reason for this is often shoes are elevated at the heel and this just throws your positioning off. So an easy way to fix that is just to kick your shoes off, and it means that your feet will be nice and level. It also has the added bonus of any kind of extra range of motion that your shoes have added is now taken away. Now, once you've got the perfect deadlift setup, think about progressively overloading. Now, what that is just about adding weight each week as you get stronger and to continue to challenge yourself. Now, it doesn't only need to be weight that you progress on, you can also progress on the number of sets you do, the number of reps you do. You can even use a progression scheme like this. It's just nice and simple, and it means you can cap out your linear gains whilst they're still there. You really want for this next part to be able to take your deadlift until a point in which you plateau. If you are plateaued and your weight is stuck and you can't continue to linearly progress, what we look at is changing your strategy. Now, if you've been focused solely on low reps, something you can do is switch it up, use some high reps. If you've only been doing deadlifts for one set, you can focus on doing it for more sets, like 3 sets. Or if you've been doing a lot of volume on your deadlifts, you can cut that volume down and really try and use something like top sets to really test your strength level. Now, once you've got yourself into a kind of intermediate phase, something is going to need to happen. Another thing that will come into the strategy is whether you need growth or to peak your strength. Now, a good way to decide that, if you're a smaller guy, you're relatively skinny, but you can do some pretty impressive numbers. I put myself into this camp, I can deadlift 2.5 times my body weight, but my body weight is relatively low. All of my kind of strength, and guys like this are guys that have really specialised into their powerlifting movements, but they've maybe not put on as much tissue, as much mass as they actually could. This is because we have made neurological adaptations to strength. We've made it that our brains and our neuromuscular system can do these movements really well and really efficiently. The opposite camp of this is the guys that have put on a lot of size. Maybe they've really focused on bodybuilding movements. These guys maybe have a lot of size, but if their deadlift isn't that high, it's because they've not made the neurological adaptations. They've not done the skill work, they've not trained maybe sufficiently heavy at sufficiently low reps to really try and peak their deadlift. Now, in these two camps, what we find is the people that need to peak and the people that need to grow. Now, here are the strategies for how to grow. To grow, you need to do disadvantageous movements. Movements that would maybe make your regular deadlift harder to do. So this would be something like RDLs, Romanian deadlifts. With these, we slow it down we highlight the eccentric of the movement, the lowering portion, a little bit more, and we just let that deadlift float out in front. We don't get that recuperation at the bottom of each rep where we come to a dead stop, where we've got constant time under tension. Another strategy is to use deficit deadlifts. Now with these, you stand on a plate, you line yourself up, and what you do is you're giving yourself more range of motion. You're pulling from a disadvantaged position because you have to actually pull that bar a few inches further. What this is going to do is it's going to put muscle on your hamstrings, muscles on your glutes, and muscle on your lower back. What that does is it then allows you to add this muscle to your frame, and when you've got more muscle in your frame, you've got more tissue to contract and make you stronger. A barbell row. Now, what you want to do is you want to have that weight floating out in front, pulling it to about chest level. Make sure that you're fully bent over, that you're breathing and braced and locked in that position. It's going to really help you grow your upper back, grow your lower back, and then as well you're getting a lot of skill work at breathing and bracing. This is really good to drive your growth. Now, one of the biggest things that can improve your deadlift, and it's often forgotten about by those smaller guys, the guys that are 60 kg but can deadlift 2.5 times body weight, the skinny TikTok lifter that can pull 700 pounds, the guys that are really obsessed about, what about my body weight standards? If I bulk, if I put on weight, then I'll be less competitive. My favourite 60 kg power lifter pulls this weight, and I want to compete in that weight class, and I'm going to be like him, and I'm going to break his record. If you want to get better at deadlifting, you really need to fill out. If you want your deadlift to go up and it's been stalled at the same number for months on end, and the thing that is holding you back in your head is, I want to be competitive, even though you might not even compete for the next 5 years, you need to bulk. The optimal physique for deadlifters has one thing in common, and that's not a V-taper. It is an O-inflator. You need to dedicate some time to becoming a bloat lord. For peaking your deadlift, you need to do the opposite. Obviously you've got to still do your skill specific deadlift work, you've got to deadlift, but something that you can implement is advantageous movements, movements that are easier but allow you to get more weight on the bar. Something like rack pulls. Rack pulls, you pull from an advantaged position, it's slightly higher up, mid-shin level, and this just allows you to pull your deadlift from a position in which you're stronger, and it means you can load more plates on and get your neuromuscular system used to firing under heavy weights. What we want to avoid with this, however, is setting the pins too high. If the pins are too high, you're going to be doing a rack pull above the knee, and all that's going to be doing is working your traps. It's not really going to build your deadlift, just a lot of way to rack up fatigue without much benefit to actual strength output. Peaking also has barbell rows. Now with this variation, I'm showing a Pendlay row, pull for the floor like a dead stop. It's very similar to the deadlift because you're letting all that force go out the bar at the bottom, and then you're pulling from that dead stop. It's just going to have all the benefits of the barbell row, but you're going to be able to use heavier weights, and it's going to be a little bit more specific, it's going to be a little bit more similar to a heavy deadlift. Lastly, for peaking, I like to use the trap bar deadlift. Trap bar deadlift is very similar to the deadlift, but we usually find that people are about 15% stronger. It's just a pull from the floor, and it allows you to strengthen all the relevant muscles of the deadlift from a different joint angle whilst overloading the weight. This is just going to make sure that you've got a lot of drive, a lot of neurological adaptation from pulling that deadlift off the floor. This is a bonus, and it is something to watch. With deadlifts, often people find themselves getting injured.
I broke my back.
Now, I like to use these two exercises to make sure that my core is nice and tight, and I think they really do help with my breathing and bracing ability. And it's just to pair sit-ups on the decline bench with some back extensions or glute ham raises. These are really good. It just helps you develop your anterior muscles of the abdomen and the posterior muscles of the lower back, glutes and hamstrings. Just making sure that everything's tight and everything's kind of safe. These are areas that we don't want to neglect when it comes to deadlifting. Now finally, if you've got to this part of the video, thank you very much for staying. But this is the secret accessory exercise that will help your deadlift no matter what. It's good for growth, it's good for peak, it's good for everything when it comes to your deadlift. If this exercise goes up, your deadlift is guaranteed to go up. And that is the squat. It's the unsung hero of your deadlift. If your squat goes up, your deadlift will go up in turn. And if your deadlift goes up, your squat will probably be the same. If you use this exercise, you will find an improvement, and it's because it works all the main movers but in a disadvantaged position. You've got the quads, the lower back, the glutes all engaging under heavy load in a more stressful position. You also are training to breathe and brace. This is one of the most specific things you can do for your deadlift. I've all too often met guys that when I ask them what they do for their legs, they will tell me they just leg press. If you just leg press and you want to get a good deadlift, you're leaving gains on the table. And with that, that is the comprehensive guide to deadlifting. Now let me know if you enjoyed, and if there's anything that I missed, just down in the comments below.